Hello aspirants, welcome to Environment course by UPSC experts. This is class 12 of the course. Let's go to the class notes and start with class 12. Now, let's start with international environmental conferences, conventions and initiatives. See, first international conference with respect to environment happened in 1972. See, we'll go as per the sequence and we will discuss each and every institution or initiative taken with respect to environment. See, first, see, till 1970s, the world was concerning least about the environment, right? They are focusing mostly on poverty reduction, economic development, etc. However, in 1960s, right, there are many extreme level events and there are many scientists who are raising concerns with respect to environmental pollution, air pollution, right, environment destruction, etc. Right. So the world leaders they have started talking about the environment, and the first conference, right, they held is Stockholm conference or United Nations conference on human environment in 1972 to discuss about all the issues, right? So in 1972 there is this conference that is called Stockholm conference because it held in Stockholm, so it came to be known as Stockholm conference. So it is UN's first major conference on international environmental issues. So UN का first major conference on international environmental issues. Then organized in 1972 to coordinate global efforts to promote sustainability and safeguard the natural environment with the theme One Earth, only one Earth. So only one Earth is the theme of Stockholm conference. Then 122 countries adopted the Stockholm Declaration. So they signed Stockholm Declaration and they released a declaration, right? That is Stockholm Declaration onto 26 principles and an action plan. In Stockholm Declaration, they have 26 principles and an action plan, right? And the three dimensions of the conference, right? In the conference, the major thing that happened is countries agreed not to harm each other's environment or the areas beyond national jurisdiction. Countries agreed that they don't harm each other's environment or a environment beyond the national jurisdiction. जैसे open ocean से, right? Environment beyond. Then action plan to study the threat to Earth's environment. So action plan to study, right? Threats to Earth's environment. Earth environment का threats के बारे में study करने के लिए action plan लिया. Then establishment of an international body called UN Environment Program, that is UNEP. So this is very important. So this is the first UN organization formed, right? UNEP to bring cooperation among countries with respect to environment, right? So establishment of international body called UN. So UNEP, right? UNEP, that is in 1972. We'll be studying comprehensively about UNEP. First, let's discuss about Stockholm Conference. Other outcome and success of Stockholm Conference are, right? So identification of theme of sustainable development. Identification of theme of sustainable development. So sustainable development theme को identify किया, and 20 years later, right, we will be study, that is in 1992 Earth Summit sustainable development was defined, right? So इसमें 1972 में just आइडेंटिफिकेशन ऑफ थीम ऑफ सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट, ठीक है, सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट को आइडेंटिफाई किया बस, राइट? देन इन अर्थ समिट वी विल बी स्टडीइंग, राइट, सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट क्या है, कैसे डिफाइन किया एंड ऑल, राइट? देन नेक्स्ट इज establishing key principles, that is precautionary principle, right? Precautionary principle is, that is, it is better to take precautions in protecting environment rather than एनवायरमेंट डिस्ट्रॉय होने के बाद उसको रेटिफाई करने से कि प्रिकॉशन होना लेना जरूरी है, राइट? सो देन द वियना कन्वेंशन फॉर प्रोटेक्शन ऑफ ओजोन लेयर वाज द फर्स्ट मल्टीलेटरल एनवायरमेंट एग्रीमेंट दैट कोडिफाइड प्रिकॉशनरी मेजर्स इन 1985. सो प्रिकॉशनरी प्रिंसिपल, राइट, सो एस्टैब्लिश किया. देन polluter pays principle, those that is polluter pays principle, that is those producing pollution should bear the cost of managing it to prevent damage to human health and so जो भी pollute कर रहा है उनको पे करना पड़ेगा, उनको चीजें ठीक करना पड़ेगा, that is pollution pays principle, right? These principles are adopted, right? Then see, India's prime minister at the time, Indira Gandhi participated the Stockholm conference in person, right? She went to the Stockholm and participated in the conference and was the only foreign head of the government, right? Foreign head of the government, only foreign head of the government out of 130 nations in attendance at the Stockholm conference. बाकी सब लोग है other representatives, कोई minister गया, right? कोई secretary गया and all happened, but only foreign head as a prime minister or president, let's say head of the nation, right? So only prime minister, foreign head of the government out of 130 nations who participated, attended the Stockholm conference. This is also again very important point, right? So that is about the Stockholm conference or United Nations Conference on Human Environment, which is happened in 1972, right? Right. So now let's discuss about UNEP, right? So UNEP is formed in 1972 at Stockholm Conference, right? At Stockholm Conference. So it is an intergovernmental organization, right? Intergovernmental organization, right? So that is all governments of the states are members. Intergovernmental organization established in June 1972 as an outcome of United Nations Conference on Human Environment or Stockholm Conference 1972. Right? It works under the umbrella of UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, identifying and addressing the most relevant environmental issues of our time. Right? So its objective, it sets the global environmental agenda. Global environmental agenda promotes the coherent implementation of environmental dimension of sustainable development and serves as authoritative advocate for global environment. Authoritative advocate for global environment, right? Right. So and headquarters is Nairobi, Kenya. See, this is again important because third world country में Kenya is a third world country, right? में headquarter इसका है, right? So its headquarter is at Nairobi, right? So 1972 में Nairobi में headquarter Kenya, right? So this is we need to remember. Then membership is 193 member states including India, right? Then major reports of UNEP. So these we need to remember, that is Global Environment Outlook Report, right? Global Environment Outlook Report is released by UNEP. Then Adaptation Gap Report and Emission Gap Report. So ऐसा याद करना है UNEP, right? UNEP GAP, right? NEP gap. So जहां भी emission gap report, adaptation gap report, these two reports are released by UNEP, and global environment outlook report is also released by UNEP, right? These three are important reports you need to remember. At least कौन आता है current affairs में भी इनका आता रहता है, right? So UNEP, right? UNEP emissions gap report, adaptation gap report. So gap, UNEP, gap, NEP, right? Like that you can remember. Global Environment Outlook Report also you need to remember, right? Geo report, right? Then next is United Nations Environment Assembly is a governing body of the UNEP. So UNEP is governed by United Nations Environment Assembly, UNEA, right? So UNEA is world's highest level decision making body on environment, right? So UNEA is the world's highest decision making body on the environment with a universal membership of all 193 member states. So UNEA assembly, right? Every country have representatives, right? So they establish UNEP के members को choose करेंगे, right? So UNEA, so this is the one which takes all the decisions, right? So UNEP is chaired by executive director, right? UNEP depends on voluntary contributions for 95% of its income. So voluntary contributions for 95% of its income. So UNEP depends on voluntary contributions for 95% of its income. So UNEP administers administers or provides secretariat functions for many multilateral environmental agreements, and other entities. Right? UNEP administers or provides secretariat for many multilateral environment agreements and other entities. वो क्या है वो डिस्कस करेंगे एंड इनको एक एक को डिस्कस करेंगे. राइट? सी, right? So basically UNEP administers or provides secretariat functions for 15 multilateral environmental agreements, right? So 15 multilateral environmental agreements को UNEP प्रोवाइड करती है. तो उन 15 मल्टीलेटरल एनवायरमेंटल अग्रीमेंट्स अंडर यूएनईपी क्या है, राइट? एंड उनको एक एक करके विल बी डिस्कसिंग, राइट? सो फर्स्ट इज, सी दिस इज फर्स्ट, दैट इज रामसर कन्वेंशन, right? Ramsar Convention we have already discussed. Then second is 1972 Convention on Protection of World Cultural and Natural Heritage Sites, right? So this is second, 1972, right? Convention for Protection of World Cultural and Natural Heritage. Then third is sites, right? Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, and this is sites, right? So 1973. Then fourth, see everything one by one we will be discussing it comprehensively, sir, right? First, that is Marpol Convention, right? Like this. See, then Convention on Long Range Transboundary of Air Pollutants, right? Then Vienna Convention and Montreal Protocol for Ozone Protection. See briefly, see this is fifth, this is sixth, right? And then Basel Convention on Control of Transboundary Movement of and their Disposal, 7. And Convention, Biological Convention, right? UNFCCC, combat desertification, these 3 also we'll be discussing, right? ये 1992 में हुआ अर्थ समिट में, right? So this is 8, this is 9, and this is 10, right? Then Rotterdam Convention on Hazardous Chemicals in International Trade, 11. Then Aarhus Convention, right? This is 12. And Stockholm Convention, this is 13. And Minamata Convention on Mercury, this is 14. And CMS Convention or Bonn Convention, this is 15. So there are total 15 environmental agreements under UNEP. So 15 है, right? इस 15 को UNEP कुछ ना कुछ services provide करती है, right? So now let's discuss one by one. See these two, right? I have been discussed. See Ramsar Convention we have already discussed, right? See this you will be doing in art and culture, right? So that's why I am not discussing it here, right? So we will start from sites and we will proceed with one by one, right? So now let's start with sites, right? So now let's start with sites. So sites is Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, right? So that is 1973, right? 1973 sites, right? So Genesis, it is an international agreement between governments which was drafted as a result of resolution adopted in 1963 at the meeting of IUCN members, right? ठीक है, पहले आया ड्राफ्ट किया, right? Resolution adopted by the meeting of members of IUCN, right? The text of the convention finally agreed in 1973 and entered into force in 1975, right? So entered into force in 1975. Initially IUCN के अंदर कुछ हो रहा था, right? Then nations ने agree किया, so इसको sites as a sites हो किया, right? Then the objective is to ensure that international trade in specimens of wild animals and plants doesn't threaten the survival of species. The objective is international trade, ठीक है, जो wild animals का body parts वगैरह का trade doesn't threaten the survival of species, right? जो भी मतलब basically ये illegal trade वगैरह रोकने के लिए, या कि भाई illegal trade of जैसे मान ले लाइन का बोन्स हो गया, लाइन टीथ वगैरह, if you are transporting that international trade doesn't affect the survival of the species, right? So ये objective है. Then membership is 184 countries, right? And headquarter is in Geneva, Switzerland. Secretariat is administered by UNEP located at Geneva, Switzerland, right? UNEP located at Geneva, Switzerland, right? So CITES is legally binding, right? It is important, legally binding on parties but does not take the place of national laws, right? So legally binding है, but इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि it takes place of national laws. No, nations can make laws to implement sites, right? So it is legally binding to the parties but does not take the place of national laws, right? So each party has to adopt its own domestic legislation to its implementation at the national level. So legally binding है but national laws का जगह नहीं लेती है, right? Rather her nations has to adopt its own domestic legislations to its implementation at a national level, right? All 184 parties have right to attend, to put forward proposals to consider and to vote on all decisions. So on all decisions every party they can attend and vote, right? Then the species covered by sites are listed in three appendices according to the degree of protection they need, right? So जो भी वाइल्ड लाइफ एनिमल्स एंड प्लांट्स है, राइट, उनको 3 लिस्ट के अंदर डाला गया, राइट, according to the degree of protection they need, right? So that is appendix 1. So appendix 1 includes species threatened with extinction, जो भी स्पीसीज है वो एक्सटिंक्ट हो सकता है बिकॉज ऑफ इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड, राइट, उनको अपेंडिक्स 1 में लगाया, राइट? सो साइट्स प्रोहिबिट इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड इन स्पेसिमेंस ऑफ दी स्पीसीज, स्पेसिमेंस मींस उनका कुछ भी बॉडी पार्ट्स हो उनको प्रोहिबिट करती है ट्रेड में, राइट, इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड में, राइट, एक्सेप्ट व्हेन द पर्पस ऑफ इंपोर्ट इज नॉट कमर्शियल, राइट, एक्सेप्ट, ठीक है, प्रोहिबिट करती है except when the purpose of import is not commercial. Example for scientific research. So अगर scientific research के लिए specimens को trade कर रहा है तो sites allow करती है. अगर commercial है, right, selling and buying of specimens है, so it prohibit international trade, right? So this is appendix 1. Then second is appendix 2. So appendix 2 lists species that are not necessarily now threatened with extinction, but they may become so unless trade is closely controlled, right? So abhi extinction pe nahi hai, but if trade is not controlled they may in future face extinction, right? So that is under appendix 2. Also includes so called look-alike species, right? Also includes so called look-alike species, that is species whose specimen in trade look like those of the species listed for conservation reasons, right? So it also includes, so ये important है, look alike species are covered under appendix 2, right? So that is species whose specimen in trade look like those of species listed for conservation reasons, right? So that is international trade, and इन दोनों में, right, एक ये भी है, 2 चीज कवर किया appendix 2 में, right? These two, international trade may be authorized by granting on export permit or री-एक्सपोर्ट सर्टिफिकेट. सो परमिट के साथ इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड ऑथराइज किया जाएगा अपेंडिक्स 2 स्पीसीज में, राइट. इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड में बी ऑथराइज्ड बाय ग्रांटिंग एन एक्सपोर्ट परमिट और री-एक्सपोर्ट सर्टिफिकेट, राइट. देन अपेंडिक्स 3 contains species that are protected in at least one country, at least one country which has asked other sites parties for assistance in controlling the trade, right? जैसे से appendix 3 में वो animals होंगे, right, that are protected at least one country. अगर एक country भी protect किया and से इंडिया में protect किया, right, कोई भी species ले से species X, right? So species X is protected and India is asking other countries, right, for assistance in controlling the trade, right? उन species को जैसे इंडिया बोला तो X को रखेंगे appendix 3 में, right? X को रखेंगे appendix 3 में. So international trade in specimens of species is allowed only on presentation of appropriate permits or certificates. जब permits और certificates provide करेंगे तभी allow करेंगे, right? So जैसे मान ले X का कुछ species, right, एक animal है, right, उसको इंडिया ने बोला अपेंडिक्स 3 में रखो, राइट. सो देन इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड के लिए, राइट, इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड के लिए अपेंडिक्स में रख दिया. सो इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड के लिए यू नीड अप्रोप्रिएट परमिट्स एंड सर्टिफिकेट्स, राइट. सो नाउ लेट्स स्टडी अबाउट इंडिया एंड साइट्स. ठीक है, साइट्स में इंडिया इज मेंबर, राइट. सो आज तक साइट्स में इंडिया क्या क्या कर रही थी, क्या रोल प्ले किया, दैट विल बी स्टडी. सो एक्सटेंसिव यूज ऑफ अपेंडिक्स 3, राइट. सो इंडिया अपेंडिक्स 3 को अच्छे से यूज किया, राइट. इंडिया रिक्वेस्ट करती है इन स्पीसीज को अपेंडिक्स 3 में रखो ताकि ट्रेड कंट्रोल में रखे, राइट. सो दैट इज सिंस इट्स ratification of CITES in 1976, right, India has listed 39 taxa in appendix 3. 39 plants or animals under appendix 3 में इंडिया इंक्लूड किया, राइट. सो दो द लिस्टिंग थ्रू द लिस्टिंग्स important international trade data was gathered that supported decision for application of different site appendix with the stricter trade controls, right. So this is nothing कि भाई इससे बेसिकली हमें ये याद करना है कि भाई अभी तक 39 स्पीस टैक्सा इंडिया ने अपेंडिक्स 3 के अंदर रखवाया, राइट. देन मॉनिटरिंग ऑफ इलीगल ट्रेड ऑफ illegal killing of elephants program. See, while studying about elephant we have studied about this, right, that is Mike, right. हमने ऐसा भी याद किया Mike sites, right. Mike sites as a पूरा word we can remember. So Mike sites, so Mike कौन करता है, that is sites, that is sites. So Mike is monitoring of illegal killing of elephants program, monitoring of illegal killing of elephants program. An initiative of sites, right, it is an initiative of sites that measures the levels, trends and causes of elephant mortality at a global level, right. Levels, trends and causes of elephant mortality at a global level में, right. Sites, initiative of sites that measures levels, trends and causes of elephant mortality at a global level. So India has 10 sites participating in Mike program, monitoring of illegal killing of elephants program, right. So India साइट्स में, सो साइट्स में इन प्रोग्राम में पार्टिसिपेट कर रही है. देन डायरेक्टर ऑफ वाइल्ड लाइफ प्रिजर्वेशन, डायरेक्टर ऑफ वाइल्ड लाइफ प्रिजर्वेशन गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया, राइट, is the management authority for sites, that is sites MA in India, right. So management authority of sites in India is what, director of wildlife preservation, right. Then government of India appointed 5 scientific authorities to assist sites MA, that is director of wildlife preservation, ठीक है, वो management authority of sites का वो करता है, right. Government of India appointed 5 scientific authorities to assist the sites MA management authority on scientific aspects of sites, scientific aspects of sites, right. So वो पांच scientific authorities कौन है, right. So that is Geological Survey of India Calcutta, right. Botanical Survey of India Kolkata, right. So you need to remember, see, Geological Survey of India कहाँ है, कोलकाता में. Botanical Survey of India कहाँ है, कोलकाता में. Then Central Marine Fishes Research Institute, that is in Cochin, right. Then Wildlife Institute of India, that is in Dehradun, right. Then Institute of Forest Genetics and Tree Breeding, that is in Coimbatore, right. Institute of Forest Genetics and Tree Breeding is in Coimbatore, right. These 5 institutions, right, appointed scientific authorities that assist the sites management authority of our India, right. So sites management authority वो क्या करता है भाई, sites implementation पे पूरा ध्यान ये रखते हैं, right. So who is that, that is director of wildlife preservation, right. So that is with India and sites. So now we are done. Let's briefly talk about illegal wildlife trade, right. Illegal wildlife trade, right, because sites से illegal wildlife trade and animals के बीच में, right. So now let's briefly see as per WWF, right. WWF we'll be studying about WWF also, right. So WWF illegal wildlife trade is estimated to reach 20 billion per year, which makes wildlife trafficking the world's 4th largest illicit trade after narcotics, human trafficking and trade in counterfeit goods. So 4th largest trafficking है illegal wildlife trafficking, right. Then illegal wildlife trade not only is threat to conservation of species but also poses risk to human health, right. जैसे disease spread हो गया, right. जैसे कुछ birds को लेके गए, स्मगलिंग किए या इलीगल ट्रेड किया, राइट. उनके साथ कुछ डिसीजेस, वायरसेस भी जा सकता है, राइट. ह्यूमन हेल्थ के रहते, नेगेटिवली इंपैक्ट्स द कंट्रीज नेचुरल रिसोर्सेस एंड लोकल कम्युनिटीज को इंपैक्ट करती है एंड नेचुरल रिसोर्सेस को भी कर सकते हैं. देन इनिशिएटिव्स taken by India to tackle illegal wildlife trade. Right? So all the initiatives are spelled out here. Right? जो भी act है, right? Because it can be asked. Right? Question भी ये हो सकता है prelims में और mains में भी they can ask initiatives taken by India to tackle illegal wildlife trade. Illegal wildlife trade. So first is Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Right? So prohibits trade in over 1800 species of wild animals, plants and their derivatives. जैसे Schedule 1 species है उनमें ट्रेड कर ही नहीं सकता, राइट? सो 1800 स्पीसीज पे ट्रेड प्रोहिबिट करती है, राइट? सो दिस इज एन वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एक्ट. इसको भी हम कॉम्प्रिहेंसिवली डिस्कस करेंगे व्हाइल डिस्कसिंग लेजिस्लेशंस विथ रेस्पेक्ट टू एनवायरनमेंट, राइट? देन आता है द प्रिवेंशन ऑफ क्रूएल्टी ऑफ एनिमल्स एक्ट. द प्रिवेंशन ऑफ क्रूएल्टी ऑफ एनिमल्स एक्ट, सो दैट इज 1960 act. So this empowers authorities to penalize and jail those who harm wildlife, right? Empowers authorities to penalize and jail those who harm wildlife. So harm wildlife, so इसमें जैसे मान ले illegal trade कर रहा है, right? So they have to उन animals को injections देंगे, उन animals को बांध के रखेंगे, right? उन animals को एक बॉक्स में रखेंगे, जैसे रेड सैंड बोवा स्नेक है, राइट? सो उसको स्मगल करते हैं. अब स्मगल करने के लिए उसको एक जार में रखते हैं, राइट? सो दैट इज हार्मिंग एनिमल्स ओनली, राइट? दैट इज हार्मिंग एनिमल्स, दैट इज लाइक किडनैपिंग एनिमल्स, राइट? सो इसमें भी प्रिवेंशन ऑफ क्रूएल्टी ऑफ एनिमल्स से भी इलीगल ट्रेड को हम डील कर सकते हैं, राइट? देन आईपीसी 1860 also has provisions and section for rigorous imprisonment for killing, poaching, maiming, poisoning or torturing animals. So IPC 1860 has provisions for rigorous imprisonment for killing, poaching, maiming, poisoning or torturing animals. So IPC also provides for illegal trade को deal करने के लिए, right? Then next is, right? So these three. Next is Customs Act 1962 and Export Import Policy under the Foreign Trade Development and Regulation Act. Foreign Trade Development and Regulation Act also has provisions for regulating international trade in wildlife species, right? So Customs Act 1962, Export Import Policy under Foreign Trade Development and Regulation Act also has provisions for regulating international trade in wildlife species, right? Then the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, right, established under the Ministry of Environment and Forests, works to combat organized wildlife crime in India, right? So ये institution है, ये भी हम पढ़ेंगे, right? This also we will be studying. कौन क्या है, कौन members है, we will be studying, right? So Wildlife Crime Control Bureau भी establish किया. Then India is member of CITES, which regulates trade in wildlife globally, right? Then India collaborates with organizations like Traffic, ये भी हम discuss करेंगे, Traffic क्या है, right? And International Fund for Animal Welfare to monitor and combat illegal wildlife trade. So Traffic basically illegal trade of wildlife animals को control करती है, right? We will be studying, right? So these are the initiatives which India has taken to tackle illegal wildlife trade, right? Illegal wildlife trade को tackle करने के लिए. Then so ये हो गया sites. See, अब देखो, here we are done with sites, right? So we are done with sites. So sites के बाद we are doing Convention for Prevention of Pollution from Ships, that is MARPOL Convention, right? We'll do MARPOL Convention, right? Now let's see, right? See, MARPOL Convention, right? So MARPOL Convention, when कब हुआ था ये? See, I am discussing year wise, right? So MARPOL Convention 1973 में हुआ, right? So that is International Convention for Prevention of Pollution for Ships. International Convention for Prevention of Pollution for Ships, or called as MARPOL Convention, right? So it is main international convention covering the prevention of pollution of marine environment by ships from operational or accidental causes. So both operational और accidentally भी pollution हुआ, marine pollution, right? So वो दोनों consider करती है, operational और accidental causes, right? So Marpol Convention was adopted in 1973. The protocol of 1978 was adopted in response to spate of tanker accidents in 1976-77, right? So मार्कोल कन्वेंशन है अडॉप्ट हुआ 1973 में, प्रोटोकॉल साइन हुआ 78 में, राइट? सो एज द 1973 मार्पोल कन्वेंशन had not yet entered into force, the 1978 Marpol Protocol absorbed the parent convention, right? So 1973 अभी तक आया नहीं है, so 1978 absorbed the parent convention, right? And it was created by International Maritime Organization. So Marpol Convention है, create किसने किया? That is IMO. So that is I am creating the Marpol Convention. इसको ऐसा याद करना है, right? So I am creating the Marpol, right? So IMO, I am Marpol, creating Marpol Convention, right? So it covers prevention of pollution by sewage from ships, right? जो भी waste release हुआ वो भी cover करती है, and prevention of pollution by garbage from ships, right? So जो भी garbage निकलती है वो भी cover करती है, prevention of air pollution from ships, right? And prevention of pollution by oil tanks, oil spills वगैरह वो करती है. So basically it covers every type of pollution, right? Garbage हो, sewage हो, air pollution हो, oil pollution हो, everything. And India is signatory of Marpol Convention, right? India is signatory of Marpol Convention, right? Marpol Convention is with respect to pollution by ships, right? So now let's briefly discuss about International Maritime Organization, because इधर आया है, right? So International Maritime Organization, right? So I am Marpol Convention का IMO created किया. It was created by IMO, right? So it is a specialized agency of United Nations. So इसको ऐसा याद करना, I am special agency of UN. So I am UN, I am special agency of UN, specialized agency of UN. UN का specialized agencies, I think some 15 organizations are there which are specialized agencies of UN. So IMO is also one of them, International Maritime Organization, right? So ये important point है, right? So it was formed by the convention that the United Nations approved in 1948, and it convened for the first time in 1959. IMO is in charge of implementing policies that enhance security and safety of international shipping as well as prevention of pollution from ships, right? इनका एक safety and security international shipping का, and then prevention of pollution from ships. So ये दोनों इनका main काम है, right? Along with facilitating international maritime trade, it is also involved in legal matters. ये again this is important, legal matters such as questions of compensation and culpability, right? So compensation भी देगा, culpability, so ये भी legal matters भी deal करती है. So IMO currently has 175 member states and 3 associate members, and India is also a member of IMO, right? UN का organization है, so India is a member, right? So that's what about IMO and Marpol Convention, right? So Marpol Convention we are done. Now next is what? Next is Bonn Convention, right? So next is Bonn Convention, right? Or Convention on Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals. See here, let's see the list. See here, अब देखो Marpol हो गया, CITES हो गया. See this is in 1979. See Bonn Convention हुआ 1979 में. So I forgot to write it there. Instead मैं last में लिखा. So actually it has to be there, right? Year wise, sequence wise जा रहा तो so 1971, so 1979. So here it would be there, right? 1979. So CMS 79 CMS. We will first discuss this, right? Then only we will discuss long range transboundary pollution, right? So that would be the next of our discussion. So that is CMS Convention, right? So see. Bonn Convention or Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals. Convention on Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals. So CMS CMS was signed in Bonn, Germany in 1979. So write it 1979, right? As an intergovernmental treaty under the aegis of UNEP, right? Under the aegis of UNEP, right? UNEP, it aims to protect terrestrial, aquatic, and avian migratory species throughout their ranges. So इधर ये याद करना है हमें migratory generally what comes to our migration is migration आते ही हमें सिर्फ birds याद आएंगे but it covers all terrestrial जैसे टाइगर भी है उनको भी कवर करेगी एक्वेटिक स्पीसीज जैसे सी लायन ड्यूगोंग राइट सो दे विल बी कवर्ड राइट एंड एवियन बर्ड तो कवर है ही राइट सो इट एम्स टू प्रोटेक्ट टेरिस्ट्रियल एक्वेटिक एंड एवियन माइग्रेटरी स्पीसीज throughout their ranges right. CMS brings together the governments of the countries through which migratory species pass the range states right. So brings together governments of the countries through which migratory species pass through range states. It lays the legal foundation to conduct conservation measures on global scale right. Then the legal instruments under CMS may range from legally binding agreements to less formal MOUs and can be adapted to fit the requirements of each region right. MOUs and can be adopted to fit the requirements of each region right. Then CMS is the only worldwide convention that was founded exclusively for the preservation of migrant animals right. Then parties membership is 133 parties. India is member of CMS since 1983 right. Then CMS has two appendices, that is appendix 1 lists migratory species threatened with extinction and appendix 2 lists migratory species that would significantly benefit from international cooperation right. So then India and CMS right. India has signed the non-legally binding memorandum of understanding with CMS on conservation and management of Siberian cranes, marine turtles and dugongs and raptors right. Then India hosted conference of party in 13. So question कभी statement ये आ सकता है India ever hosted conference of parties of CMS right. Conference of parties include see 133 countries है right. So every one country is one conference of one party right. So this is 133 parties, that is 133 nations right. So conference of parties means where all the 133 nations meet right. So जैसे UNFCC वगैरह में भी हम लोग देखते हैं conference of parties right. So same just like that. So इधर भी CMS में conference of parties every 1 year 2 years 3 years में they meet. So here CMS conference of parties they meet every 3 years. 3 years में एक बार मिलते हैं right. So conference of parties India hosted COP13 of CMS in 2020 में इंडिया ने होल्ड किया right. So this you need to remember कहाँ होल्ड किया गांधीनगर गुजरात में right. गांधीनगर गुजरात India has hosted conference of parties right. UNFCC का भी India hosted right. That we will study right. 2002 में India hosted right. UNFCCC का conference of parties. So we will be discussing it right. Conference of parties India hosted conference of parties. So conference of parties is the principal decision making of the CMS right. It meets once every 3 years and sets the budget and priorities of following 3 years right. 3 साल का वो करती है right. Then India is part of 2 of the special species initiatives of CMS. India is part of the 2 of the special species initiatives of CMS, that is Central Asian Flyway, Central Asian Mammals Initiative right. So Central Asian Flyway and Central Asian Mammals Initiative right. Then Zoological Survey of India for the first time compiled the list of migratory species of India under CMS before the conference of parties. जब conference of parties 13 हुआ इंडिया में गांधीनगर में जब Zoological Survey of India right for the first time compiled the list of migratory species of India ठीक है. पूरा लिस्ट बना दिया migratory species of India का in when 2020 जब गुजरात में conference of parties हुआ right COP13 right. So that is COP 13 and CMS, right? This is basically migratory species or Bond Convention, right? So Bond Convention you can be given in multiple choice questions, MCQs. Bond Convention is related to what? Migratory species convention or migratory species, CMS, right? So now उसके बाद CMS हो गया 1979. So after that what we will be studying? So we will be studying since 1971 UNECE Convention on Long Range Transboundary Air Pollution. So let's discuss it. See, I made sure that notes is as comprehensive as possible, covers everything. See, this convention you won't be finding in most of the books, right? Right? But it is important. So that is LRTAP, that is Convention on Long Range Boundary Air Pollution, right? Long Range Transboundary Air Pollution. Basically, it is of air pollution with respect to transboundary, that is nations के बीच में transboundary level air pollution, which is long range, right? Let's study. See, LRTAP, right, signed in 1979, is the first multilateral agreement addressing transboundary air pollution, right? that है दो nations के बीच में, right, transboundary movement of air pollution, जैसे CO2 इंडिया में emit हुआ, right, but बांग्लादेश में जा रहा है, पाकिस्तान में जा रहा है, so that regulation is transboundary air pollution. but ये यूरोपियन कंट्रीज का है, right? This is not for UN का वो नहीं है, right? This is UN will be studying about it. See, it created a regional framework applicable to Europe, North America, right? Europe, North America, Russia and former East Bloc countries, right? For reducing transboundary air pollution. अब देखो ये कब साइन हुआ? 1979 when USA, Soviet Union, right? Soviet Union are at Cold War, right? तब ट्रांसबाउंड्री मूवमेंट रेगुलेशन के लिए साइन किया. फिर यूरोपियन कंट्रीज भी पार्टिसिपेट किया, नॉर्थ अमेरिकन कंट्रीज, यूएसए, कनाडा, दे पार्टिसिपेटेड एंड रशिया आल्सो पार्टिसिपेटेड एंड फॉर्मर ईस्ट ब्लॉक कंट्रीज, दैट इज द रशिया का countries, right? So they participated for reducing transboundary air pollution. The convention has 51 parties, that is 51 countries and 8 protocols. 51 countries ने 8 प्रोटोकॉल साइन किया, most of which addresses specific pollutants, right? जो भी प्रोटोकॉल्स है स्पेसिफिक पोल्यूटेंट्स, मान ले कुछ CO2 को डील करेगी, राइट, कुछ और को डील करेगी, राइट? सो टू मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट प्रोटोकॉल्स आर, 8 प्रोटोकॉल्स में टू मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट आर द heavy metals protocol aims to control emissions of lead, cadmium and mercury, right? Aims to control emissions of heavy metals like lead, cadmium and mercury that are caused by anthropogenic activities and that are subject to long range atmospheric transport, right? Next is Gothenburg protocol, right? Gothenburg protocol, that is 1999. Gothenburg protocol 1999. So it aims to improve air quality across borders and specifically addresses the abatement of acidification, right? So it is very important, right? I think in mains they have already asked the question. So it aims to improve air quality across borders, specifically address abatement of acidification, eutrophication and ground level ozone, right? So इन तीनों को specifically address करती है, right? Then amendments to Gothenburg Protocol updated targets to further reduce emissions of harmful air pollutions and added measures to address particulate matter including black carbon, right? The amended Gothenburg Protocol is the first international agreement addressing black carbon. Right? So the amended Gothenburg Protocol in force since 2019, the amended Gothenburg Protocol in force since 2019 is the only binding regional treaty anywhere in the world to regulate major air pollutant emissions, right? It already supports, right, amended since only binding regional treaty anywhere in the world to regulate major air pollutant. It supports 28 parties, including the European Union, the UK, the USA, Canada, to deliver significant emissions cuts. Right? So that's why it is important. Black carbon को भी deal करती है, and ये भी चीज याद करना है आपको. It mainly deals with acidification, eutrophication, and ground level ozone. So Gutenberg Protocol you need to remember. Right? So next is Vienna Convention and Montreal Protocol for the protection of ozone layer. Right? So Vienna Convention and Montreal Protocol for protection of ozone layer. So Vienna Convention is signed in 1985, right? And Montreal Protocol is signed in 1987, right? So for protection of ozone layer. So for this, we need to first understand ozone layer, ozone hole, right? Ozone depleting substances, etc. Right? Everything we'll be studying. So this is one of the very important, right? So Vienna Convention and Montreal Protocol for protection of ozone layer. So first let's understand what is ozone and what is ozone layer, right? So ozone is a natural gas. Ozone is what? O3, right? O3, that is oxygen arranged in, right? It is an allotrope of oxygen consisting of three atoms of oxygen, right? Together bound in non-linear fashion. So say this is like this, right? So three atoms of oxygen bound in a non-linear fashion, right? So it is found in two different layers of atmosphere. We have already studied, right? So ozone is present in ground level, right? So ground level and at stratosphere also. Stratosphere, right? So जो ground level में जो that is troposphere, right? Ozone in troposphere is bad because it dirts the air and helps in the formation of smog, right? ये bad ozone बोलते हैं, right? ये air pollutant है, right? नुकसान कर देती है इंसान को, right? Smog form करती है, right? Which is not good to breath, right? Ozone in the stratosphere, right? Troposphere में bad ozone है, right? Stratosphere में is good ozone in the stratosphere is good because it protects life on earth by absorbing some of the sun's harmful ultraviolet rays, right? Because it protects life on earth by absorbing some of the sun's harmful rays. So ये stratosphere में good ozone है, right? So earth है, right? So ozone layer is there in the stratosphere, right? So this is good because this layer absorbs UV radiations of the sun. अगर ये ओजोन लेयर नहीं होता, राइट, यूवी रेसेस वुड रीच अर्थ, ठीक है, इंसान में आते तो भाई कैंसर कॉजिंग एलिमेंट्स हो जाते, राइट, प्लांट्स का ग्रोथ कम कर देते, राइट, लाइक दिस, राइट. सो नुकसान है तो ओजोन लेयर इज गुड ओजोन इन स्ट्रेटोस्फीयर, राइट. नाउ लेट्स स्टडी. See, the ozone layer is very important because the configuration of ozone molecules and its chemical properties are such that ozone efficiently absorbs UV light, ultraviolet light of the sun, right, thus acting like a sunscreen of the earth. So absorbs UV light, right? So that ozone effectively absorbs UV light, right? Ozone effectively absorbs UV light, right? Thus acting like a sunscreen, right? So in doing so, ozone protects oxygen at lower altitudes, right? In doing so, ozone protects oxygen at lower altitudes from being broken up by the action of ultraviolet, right? And also keeps most of the ultraviolet radiation away from reaching the Earth's surface, right? ठीक है. सो ये ओजोन प्रोटेक्ट्स, ओजोन उधर क्या कर रही है, दो चीज कर रही है. इट प्रोटेक्ट्स ऑक्सीजन एट द लोअर एल्टीट्यूड्स. दिस इज फर्स्ट प्रोटेक्शन. लोअर एल्टीट्यूड्स में ऑक्सीजन को बचाती है, राइट, सो दैट वी कैन ब्रीथ प्रॉपरली, राइट, फ्रॉम बीइंग ब्रोकन बाय द एक्शन ऑफ अल्ट्रावायलेट रेज, एंड आल्सो कीप्स अवे अल्ट्रावायलेट रेडिएशन फ्रॉम रीचिंग द अर्थ's surface, right? Then it helps in ozone layer. Ozone helps in reducing the risks of mutation, right? So ये नुकसानदायक है, right? Because UV rays आएगा तो वो mutation करेगी and harm to plant and animal life. So helps in reducing the risk of mutation and harm to plant and animal life. So too much of UV rays can cause skin cancer, too much of UV rays can cause skin cancer and will also harm all plants and animals. And will also harm all plants and animals. Life on Earth could not exist without the protective shield of ozone layer, right? So life on Earth could not exist without the protective shield of the ozone layer, right? Could not exist without the protective shield of the ozone layer. So इसीलिए ozone layer काफी important है. But ozone layer important है, but अभी क्या हो रहा है, right? So अभी हो रहा है ozone depletion, right? So ozone layer का depletion हो रहा है, right? जैसे मान ले अर्थ है, right? से stratosphere में ozone layer है, good ozone, right? Because it is protecting us from UV rays, right? So now ozone depletion, so this ozone is getting eliminated, right? So इनको eliminate हो रहा है, so that UV rays आके हमें नुकसान कर रही है, right? So ozone depletion, that is the equilibrium between formation and destruction of ozone has been upset by the influx of several substances into the atmosphere which react with ozone and destroy it, right? हम लोग वो क्यों deplete हो रहे हैं? Ozone is depleting because we are releasing certain substances which are called ozone depleting substances. Ozone depleting substances, we are releasing it, they are going and reacting with ozone layer and destroying the ozone, and like that, right? That is leading to ozone depletion, ozone layer depletion. The rate at which ozone is being destroyed is much faster than the rate at which it is being formed. जो ओजोन फॉर्म होती है, राइट, ओजोन लेयर जो है वो भी फॉर्म होती है नीचे से जाके, राइट, ओजोन लेयर, राइट, बट जो भी अभी ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस वजह से जो नेचुरल फॉर्मिंग एंड ब्रेकिंग है वो ज्यादा होके ओजोन जल्दी खराब हो रही है, राइट, जल्दी डिस्ट्रॉय हो रही है ओजोन लेयर, राइट. सो it implies that there is a significant decrease in the concentration of ozone in a particular region of the atmosphere, hence name ozone depletion. So it implies that a significant decrease in the concentration of ozone in particular region, hence called ozone depletion. Then it is leading to, अब ozone depletion तो हो रहा है कई जगह, बिल्कुल ozone hole ही फॉर्म हुआ, right? Say ozone layer, see, say this is earth, say ozone layer is like this, राइट. सो डिप्लीशन हो रहा है कुछ जगह, दैट मीन्स जो मोटा लेयर है दैट इज बिकमिंग थिन, एंड हर कुछ जगह क्या है सीधा होल ही बन रहा है, ओजोन होल, राइट. सो ओजोन होल, राइट, दैट इज द रीजन्स ऑफ एक्सेप्शनली डिप्लीटेड ओजोन इन द स्ट्रेटोस्फियर ओवर अंटार्कटिका एंड आर्कटिक. सो जहां अंटार्कटिक एंड आर्कटिक में वी आर सीइंग ओजोन होल, दैट इज वी आर सीइंग ग्रेटर डिप्लीशन, डिनोट्स एरियाज वेयर ozone levels drop below 220 Dobson units, right? So 220 Dobson units से अगर thickness कम है, so that is we are calling it as ozone hole. So average thickness of ozone layer over earth is 300 Dobson units है, अगर 220 से कम है, so there we are calling it as ozone holes, right? So वो क्यों हो रहा है ozone hole या ozone depletion क्यों हो रहा है? Because of major ozone depleting substances. अब वो क्या है ozone depleting substances? Let's understand it now, right? So what are these ozone depleting substances? Ozone depleting substances are chemical compounds that cause the depletion of ozone layer in the Earth's atmosphere, that is in stratosphere, right? So जो chemical compounds है, right, that are causing depletion of ozone layer, right? So chemical compounds like chlorofluorocarbons, right, then halon, then carbon tetrachloride, then methyl chloroform, then hydrobromofluorocarbons, right, then hydrochlorofluorocarbons, then methyl bromide, then bromochloromethane. अब बेसिकली हमें इसमें जो भी कंपाउंड्स है उनमें क्लोरीन और ब्रोमीन है, right? So they cause ozone depletion, right? अब देखो, that's why I underline C, chlorofluorocarbons, right? So chlorine is present, so chlorine causes ozone depletion, वो भी देखते हैं हम कैसे. Then halon has also chlorine, right? So halons ये fire extinguishers में use होता है, right? So ozone depleting substances you need to remember them, you need to mug up. Halon option होगा ही होगा, right? If they give option like in prelims, which of the following are ozone depleting substances, right? So they give क्लोरोफ्लोरोकार्बन, हैलोन, कार्बन टेट्राक्लोराइड, जिसी में भी क्लोरीन है, सो दैट वुड बी क्लोरीन और ब्रोमीन, इन दोनों में कुछ भी है, सो दैट वुड बी ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंस. सो कार्बन टेट्राक्लोराइड, मिथाइल क्लोरो हाइड्रो ब्रोमो, अब इधर क्लोरीन नहीं है बट ब्रोमो है, ब्रोमीन है, राइट, इट विल आल्सो डिप्लीट ओजोन लेयर. देन हाइड्रो क्लोरोफ्लोरोकार्बन, इट विल डिप्लीट methyl bromide, then bromochloromethane deplete, right? So ozone depleting substances, right? All these are man-made compounds. They man-made compounds है, used extensively in air conditioning. Again ये भी याद रखना है, जो ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस है ये कहाँ कहाँ यूज होता है, दैट इज इन एयर कंडीशनिंग. सी ये सब याद करना है, यू नीड टू मक दीज, राइट. एंड दे आर यूज्ड इन रेफ्रिजरेंट्स, refrigerators etc. Then they are used in foam blowing agents, जो भी फोम जनरेट करती है, राइट. फोम ब्लोइंग, जैसे बर्थडेस में आप फोम ब्लोइंग एजेंट्स लेके आते हो ना, उसमें ये यूज होता है. देन दे आर यूज्ड इन सॉल्वेंट्स, राइट. दे आर यूज्ड इन प्रोपेलेंट्स, राइट. दे आर यूज्ड एज फायर एक्सटिंग्विशर्स, दे आर यूज्ड इन एरोसल्स, राइट. ये सब यू नीड टू रिमेंबर, राइट. ऑल द ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस में ये, इन सब में ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस यूज होती है, राइट. वंस दीज ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस आर रिलीज्ड इनटू द एटमॉस्फेयर, राइट, जैसे एयर कंडीशनिंग में वी आर यूजिंग इट, राइट. सो दे एसीज दे रिलीज, राइट. सो दे रिलीज इनटू एटमॉस्फेयर, राइट. दे मिक्स विथ नॉर्मल एटमॉस्फेरिक गैसेस एंड इवेंचुअली रीच स्ट्रेटोस्फियर. नीचे ये कुछ नुकसान नहीं करते, राइट, ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस, ठीक है. नीचे से स्लोली स्लोली दे रीच द स्ट्रेटोस्फियर, राइट. स्ट्रेटोस्फियर में ओजोन लेयर है, राइट. इन स्ट्रेटोस्फियर दे गेट ब्रोकन डाउन बाय पावरफुल यूवी रेडिएशंस, दे गेट ब्रोकन डाउन बाय पावरफुल यूवी रेडिएशन से ये टूट जाते हैं, रिलीजिंग क्लोरीन फ्री रेडिकल्स, दैट इज Cl माइनस. सो इसीलिए आई एम सेइंग Cl क्लोरीन फ्री रेडिकल्स, ब्रोमीन फ्री रेडिकल्स, ये नुकसानदायक है, राइट, ओजोन लेयर के लिए. सो रिलीजिंग क्लोरीन फ्री रेडिकल्स, द क्लोरीन रेडिकल्स आर कंटिन्यूअसली रिगार्डेड एंड कॉज द ब्रेकडाउन ऑफ ओजोन. सी क्लोरीन क्या करती है, सी ओजोन इज O3, सो वो राइट. सो क्लोरीन फ्री रेडिकल गोस एंड रिएक्ट्स विथ वो, राइट. सो इट विल फॉर्म ClO, राइट. सो ओजोन को ब्रेक करती है, राइट. इसको ओजोन को वो हटा देती है, सो ClO फॉर्म करके, सो ओजोन को ब्रेक किया, सो ओजोन लेयर डिस्ट्रॉय होगा, राइट. दैट इज द मैकेनिज्म, राइट. सो कंटिन्यूअसली एंड कॉज द ब्रेकडाउन ऑफ ओजोन. सो ओजोन है भाई, एक वो निकाल दिया Cl ने, सो इट इज लेफ्ट विथ 2 O's, दैट इज जस्ट ऑक्सीजन. सो ओजोन is getting destroyed, right. So leading to ozone depleting substances, leading to destruction of ozone layer or forming ozone holes. Ozone holes कहाँ हो रहा है, that is Antarctica and Arctic regions. अब देखते हैं why ozone depletion, that is ozone depletion prominent at Antarctica. उसमें भी अंटार्कटिका में सबसे ज्यादा है, right. अब उधर क्यों है, let's study this, right. See again, this is important both for prelims and mains also, right. mains में भी आ सकता है, right. so prelims में भी आ सकता है, right. so ozone depletion prominent in Antarctica, right. although ozone depletion is occurring widely in the stratosphere, हर जगह हो रहा है, but the depletion is particularly marked over Antarctic region, right. Antarctic region में सबसे ज्यादा है, क्यों, this has resulted in the formation of large area of thinned ozone layer commonly called as ozone hole, right. ozone hole form करती है, right. it is only under certain meteorological conditions that ozone holes form, right. so ozone holes form जहां कुछ एरियाज में जो कंडीशंस फेवरेबल करती है उधर फॉर्म हो रहा है. अब वो क्या है, लेट्स चेक. सी दिस इज कोल्ड टेम्परेचर, कोल्ड अंटार्कटिका में क्यों फॉर्म हो रहा है, राइट. अंटार्कटिका में क्यों फॉर्म हो रहा है, दैट्स वी आर सीइंग इट. दैट इज कोल्ड टेम्परेचर ड्यूरिंग विंटर लीडिंग टू फॉर्मेशन ऑफ पोलर स्ट्रेटोस्फेरिक क्लाउड्स, राइट. पोलर स्ट्रेटोस्फेरिक क्लाउड्स हम देखेंगे. सी विंटर में अंटार्कटिका में व्हाट वी आर सीइंग, बिकॉज ऑफ extreme cold temperatures, we see in stratosphere they are cloud like things, that is polar stratospheric clouds, right. so stratosphere में Earth का stratosphere, that is upper layer में पोलर स्ट्रेटोस्फेरिक क्लाउड्स फॉर्म हो रही है बिकॉज ऑफ लो टेम्परेचर्स, राइट, विंटर में, राइट। एंड स्पेशल स्पेशल मेट्रोलॉजिकल कंडीशन, जहां भी ओजोन होल हो रहा है तो ये फॉर्म हो रहा है, राइट, पोलर स्ट्रेटोस्फेरिक क्लाउड्स। देन स्पेशल मेट्रोलॉजिकल कंडीशंस कॉल्ड पोलर वर्टेक्स, पोलर वर्टेक्स, राइट, वो भी देखते हैं। पोलर वर्टेक्स में बेसिकली क्या होता है, विंड मूवमेंट होती है जो कोल्ड एरिया की तरफ, राइट, वी विल बी डिस्कसिंग इट। देन फॉलोड बाय पोलर सनशाइन इन द स्प्रिंग, तो स्प्रिंग टाइम में, राइट, स्प्रिंग टाइम में पोलर सनराइज, दैट इज सनराइज होगा, बिकॉज विंटर में तो सन नहीं होगा पोलर एरियाज में, राइट, विंटर में 6 मंथ्स उधर धूप नहीं आएगा, सन नहीं होगा, राइट। सो जब सन शाइन होगा इन स्प्रिंग, उधर उस टाइम में ओजोन होल ज्यादा डिप्लीट होती है, राइट। सी दैट इज सी इन विंटर, इन विंटर, इन विंटर दैट इज सनलाइट लेस, राइट, विंटर में सनलाइट है ही नहीं, राइट, ड्यू टू सनलाइट ना होने की वजह से, ड्यू टू लो टेम्परेचर्स, power the formation of polar stratospheric clouds, power the formation of polar stratospheric clouds, right, in winter due to low temperatures, right, because of low temperatures, power the formation of polar stratospheric clouds, right, and these clouds provide surfaces for chemical reaction, these clouds provide surfaces for chemical reaction whose products will in the spring lead to ozone depletion, right, इस क्लाउड्स बनाती है और स्प्रिंग में ओजोन डिप्लीशन होती है, राइट, ये भी पॉइंट इंपॉर्टेंट है। इन अंटार्कटिका, राइट, पोलर ओजोन डिप्लीशन कब होती है, राइट, दैट इज इन स्प्रिंग, नॉट इन विंटर, राइट। सी क्या, चलो देखते हैं। इन स्प्रिंग, इन स्प्रिंग देयर इज फॉर्मेशन ऑफ पोलर वर्टेक्स, राइट, पोलर वर्टेक्स, दैट इज strongly westerly wind start to circulate around the continent and create an atmospheric container, right, so that is winds उसकी तरफ जाती है, right, strong westerly winds, so उनको बोलते हैं polar vortex, right, कंटेनर की तरह, right, within this polar vortex over 50% of the stratospheric ozone is destroyed during the Antarctic spring, अब अंटार्कटिक स्प्रिंग में होती है डिस्ट्रक्शन, राइट, स्प्रिंग में पोलर वर्टेक्स बनती है, राइट, एंड क्यों, द रोल ऑफ सनलाइट इन ओजोन डिप्लीशन इज द रीजन व्हाई अंटार्कटिक ओजोन डिप्लीशन इज ग्रेटेस्ट ड्यूरिंग स्प्रिंग, ठीक है, कब ज्यादा होगा, दैट इज ड्यूरिंग स्प्रिंग, राइट, ये पॉइंट याद करना है, राइट, ये विंटर में नहीं, समर में नहीं, ड्यूरिंग स्प्रिंग जब सनलाइट होता है, रोल ऑफ सनलाइट इन ओजोन, ड्यूरिंग विंटर दो द पोलर स्टैटिक क्लाउड्स आर at their most abundant, there is no light, right, no light over the pole to drive chemical reaction, right, so winter में लाइट नहीं होता, इसीलिए केमिकल रिएक्शन नहीं होती, तो ओजोन लेयर डिस्ट्रक्शन नहीं होता, जब सन आएगा स्प्रिंग में तब ज्यादा होता है, राइट, सो ड्यूरिंग द स्प्रिंग however the sun comes out, right, sun comes out providing energy to drive photochemical reactions and melt the polar stratospheric clouds, right, releasing considerable CLO, right, which drives the whole mechanism leading to destruction of ozone layer, right, so basically हमें दो तीन चीजें याद रखना है, ओजोन लेयर डिप्लीशन कहाँ कहाँ होती है, राइट, सो मतलब ओजोन होल बनने के लिए कुछ कंडीशंस चाहिए होता है, राइट, सो व्हाट आर दोस कंडीशंस, दैट इज पोलर स्ट्रेटोस्फेरिक क्लाउड्स फॉर्म होना चाहिए, राइट, देन special meteorological conditions to form polar vortex, right, followed by, see, this is first, this is second, and this is polar sunrise, right, this is third, right, जब ये तीनों conditions होंगे, right, तब होंगे polar ozone depletion, ozone hole formation, right, so वो अंटार्कटिका में ये तीनों conditions अच्छे से है, that is leading to formation of ozone holes, and कब ज्यादा ozone hole form होता है, वो that is in spring season of Antarctica, because sunlight वो तब होता है, right, so sunlight जरूरी है, right, so अब चल रहे देखे हमने भाई ओजोन क्या है, ओजोन लेयर क्या है, राइट, एंड हाउ ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस क्या है, राइट, किन किन चीजों से रिलीज हो रहा है, एंड हाउ ओजोन होल इज बीइंग फॉर्म्ड, राइट, सो नाउ अब साइंटिस्ट ने ये सब रियलाइज किया, right, in 1980s, right, in 1980s साइंटिस्ट ने ये सब ऑब्जर्व किया, ओजोन लेयर डिप्लीट हो रहा है, राइट, वी विल फेस प्रॉब्लम, राइट, अगर उसको नहीं रोके तो, राइट। सो अब रोकना है तो कैसे? सो वी हैव बॉट आउट वियना कन्वेंशन फॉर प्रोटेक्शन ऑफ ओजोन लेयर, राइट। सो साइंटिस्ट they did research and they proved कि because of ozone depleting substances, because of these substances there is formation of ozone holes and ozone depletion which is detrimental to human life and plant growth, right। तो उसको रोकना पड़ेगा। अब रोकना है तो उन्होंने लाया वियना कन्वेंशन, राइट, वियना कन्वेंशन फॉर प्रोटेक्शन ऑफ ओजोन लेयर 1985, right। So it acts as a framework for international efforts to protect the ozone layer, right, it acts as a framework, right, then it paves way for legally binding treaty through protocol called Montreal Protocol, right। under Vienna Convention 1985 में कन्वेंशन लोग मिले, राइट, एक फ्रेमवर्क टाइप बनाया, फिर उसके बाद प्रोटोकॉल लेके आए, राइट, दैट इज मॉन्ट्रियल प्रोटोकॉल, right। So India is party to Vienna Convention and its protocols, right, India is party to Vienna Convention and its protocol is Montreal Protocol। So Montreal Protocol 1987, so 1987 में प्रोटोकॉल बनाया भाई ओजोन लेयर को प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए, right। So what is Montreal Protocol? It is a multilateral environmental agreement that regulates the production and consumption of nearly 100 man-made chemicals referred to as ozone depleting substances, right। So ozone depleting substances की वजह से ozone layer deplete हो रही है, right। So अब ozone depleting substances को रोकना है। So this multilateral agreement Montreal Protocol, ठीक है, regulates production and consumption of nearly 100 man-made chemicals called as ozone depleting substances। So it was adopted in 1987, right, and entered into force in 1989, right। So it is the only UN treaty to be ratified by all UN members, only UN treaty, right, to be ratified by all UN members, सबने ratify किया, right, because डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज को ज्यादा नुकसान हो रहा था ओजोन लेयर डिप्लीशन से, राइट, दैट इज अ सिंपल फैक्ट, एंड डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज दे मेक श्योर दैट दैट ट्रीटी इज मेड and treaty is ratified by everyone and it is also one of the most successful treaty। भाई क्यों? डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज चाहता है ये सक्सेसफुल रहे, बिकॉज ओजोन लेयर डिप्लीशन ज्यादा हो रहा है इन डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज, राइट, जो नॉर्थर्न कंट्रीज है, यूरोपियन कंट्रीज, राइट, जहां यूएसए है, कनाडा है, राइट, उधर ज्यादा ओजोन लेयर डिप्लीट हो रहा था। सो ओनली यूएन ट्रीटी टू बी रैटिफाइड बाय ऑल यूएन मेंबर्स, इट इज बेस्ड ऑन द रेगुलेटरी फ्रेमवर्क प्रोवाइडेड बाय द वियना कन्वेंशन ऑन प्रोटेक्शन ऑफ ओजोन लेयर, राइट, उसके बेसिस पे, राइट, अंडर द प्रोटोकॉल डेवलपिंग एंड डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज हैव इक्वल बट डिफरेंशिएटेड रेस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज, दैट इज, ठीक है, डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज भाई ज्यादा रेस्पॉन्सिबल है ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस रिलीज करने के लिए, बिकॉज दे यूज refrigerators more, right, they use air conditioners more, right, so they have equal but differentiated responsibilities। developed countries जल्दी ozone depleting substances कम करेंगे, right, जल्दी कम करेंगे, right, equal भाई कम तो डेवलपिंग भी डेवलप्ड दोनों करेंगे बट डिफरेंट लेवल्स पे करेंगे, राइट, डिफरेंट रेट्स पे, राइट। सो रिफ्लेक्टेड इन डिफरेंट टाइम टेबल्स, राइट, डिफरेंट टाइम टेबल्स, बट बोथ ग्रुप्स ऑफ कंट्रीज हैव बाइंडिंग टाइम टारगेटेड एंड मेजरेबल कमिटमेंट्स, राइट। सो अलग अलग टाइम्स में ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस वाइप आउट करेंगे, राइट, बट डिफरेंट टाइम टेबल्स, राइट, बट सब करेंगे बाइंडिंग लेवल पे, राइट। द मॉन्ट्रियल प्रोटोकॉल आल्सो लेड टू एडॉप्शन ऑफ मल्टीलेटरल फंड टू एड डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज इन इंप्लीमेंटेशन ऑफ द प्रोटोकॉल। अब देखो, ठीक है, इफ वी सी यूएनएफसीसी में मेजर इश्यू इज UNFCCC, जब क्लाइमेट चेंज में ग्रीन हाउस गैसेस वगैरह कम करना है, राइट, मेन इश्यू इज फंड क्रिएट करना, दैट इज वेयर डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज कलेक्ट फंड्स एंड हेल्प डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज इन फाइटिंग क्लाइमेट चेंज। अब देखो इधर अच्छे से बनाया क्योंकि डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज को नुकसान हो रहा था ओजोन लेयर से, राइट। सो मॉन्ट्रियल प्रोटोकॉल आल्सो लेड टू एडॉप्शन ऑफ मल्टीलेटरल फंड टू एड डेवलपमेंट एंड इंप्लीमेंटेशन ऑफ प्रोटोकॉल, राइट। इन 1990 ओनली the technology and economic assessment panel was established as the Technology and Economic Advisory Board of Montreal Protocol parties. In 19 Technology and Economic Assessment Panel was established as the Technology and Economics Advisory Body of Montreal Protocol parties. Right? Montreal Protocol is one of the most successful and effective environmental treaties. Right? Most successful. क्यों? Developed countries चाहते हैं. राइट डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज को नुकसान हो रहा है राइट सी देयर इज नथिंग रॉन्ग कि ये सक्सेस हो भाई ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस से दिक्कत कर रही है तो उनको करना चाहिए बट सेम कन्विक्शन डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज मस्ट शो इन फाइटिंग क्लाइमेट चेंज आल्सो राइट so that's the main thing so Montreal Protocol is one of the most successful and effective environmental treaties ever negotiated and implemented as all 142 developing countries were able to meet the 100% phase out of CFCs, halons, and other ozone depleting substances in 2010. Right? So 30 साल के अंदर अंदर right? So they could bring many changes and phase out many chlorofluorocarbons or ozone depleting substances. Actions taken under the Montreal Protocol also led to the start of recovery of stratospheric ozone. So ozone भी recover हो गया. Right? So this is one of the most successful protocol. Right? Then India and Montreal Protocol. Right? India. So India became party to Vienna Convention and Montreal Protocol in 1991 and 1992 respectively. ठीक है? And India has proactively phased out the production and consumption of ozone depleting substances. Right? So implementing agency in India, that is Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Right? The ozone cell has been set up under Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change as a national ozone unit. That is, every country must have the national ozone unit which provides guidance for implementation of Montreal Protocol. So ये Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change में National Ozone Unit to render necessary service for effective time and timely implementation of Montreal Protocol and its ODS phase out program in India. Montreal Protocol and ozone depleting substance phase out program in India. Right? Then Kigali Amendment to Montreal Protocol. Kigali Amendment to Montreal Protocol. अब देखो ठीक है ये भी काफी इंपॉर्टेंट किगाली अमेंडमेंट कब हुआ दैट इज 2016 राइट अब देखो हम मॉन्ट्रियल प्रोटोकॉल सक्सेस हो गया राइट अब ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस है राइट सो ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस वेयर वी आर यूजिंग राइट मॉन्ट्रियल प्रोटोकॉल में यही है ना ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस को कम करना है राइट सो ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस वी आर यूजिंग इन एयर कंडीशनर्स वी आर यूजिंग इन रेफ्रिजरेटर्स राइट एंड वी आर यूजिंग इन फोम्स वी आर यूजिंग इन फायर एक्सटिंग्विशर्स एक्सेट्रा राइट अब ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस को हटा के राइट ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस को हटा के उनको रिप्लेस करके हम लोग लेके आए जो भी कंट्री से जो भी कंपनी से राइट वो लेके आए हाइड्रोफ्लोरोकार्बन्स HFCs ठीक है ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस हटाया एयर कंडीशनर से रेफ्रिजरेटर से ठीक है उनको हटा के लेके आए हाइड्रोफ्लोरोकार्बन्स अब हाइड्रोफ्लोरोकार्बन्स से क्या हो रहा था हाइड्रोफ्लोरोकार्बन्स है दे आर नॉट ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस ओजोन को डिप्लीट नहीं कर रहे हाइड्रोफ्लोरोकार्बन्स बट दे हैव हाई ग्रीन हाउस गैस पोटेंशियल ठीक है वी हैव स्टडीड राइट हाई ग्लोबल वार्मिंग पोटेंशियल है राइट हाई ग्लोबल वार्मिंग पोटेंशियल है सो उनकी वजह से भाई ये क्लाइमेट चेंज पे इंपैक्ट कर रहे राइट सो हाइड्रोफ्लोरोकार्बन्स राइट सो हाइड्रोफ्लोरोकार्बन्स अब हाइड्रोफ्लोरोकार्बन्स को भी एड्रेस करना है सो हाइड्रोफ्लोरोकार्बन्स एंड ग्रीन हाउस गैसेस को हम लोग कहां डील कर रहे थे वी विल बी डीलिंग विद पेरिस एग्रीमेंट ठीक है UNFCCC राइट क्लाइमेट चेंज पे वो डील कर रहे थे बट सिंस मॉन्ट्रियल प्रोटोकॉल ऑलरेडी सक्सेसफुल है राइट ऑलरेडी सक्सेसफुल है सो मेनी कंट्रीज स्पेशली द डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज ठीक है डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज क्या बोल रहे हैं डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज बोलने लग गया भाई ये किगाली अमेंडमेंट टू एक लॉ मॉन्ट्रियल प्रोटोकॉल के अंदर ही HFCs को कवर करो राइट HFCs को कवर करो और इधर भी डिबेट होने लग गया सी डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज कि भाई अब डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज टेक्नोलॉजी लेके आए राइट टेक्नोलॉजी लेके आके HFCs भी एलिमिनेट किया राइट जैसे AC एंड रेफ्रिजरेटर में HFCs भी एलिमिनेट कर रहा है अब डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज आर सेइंग सी यू हैव टेक्नोलॉजी यू हैव रिसोर्सेस सो यू कैन इजीली अडॉप्ट टू न्यूअर टेक्नोलॉजी राइट अभी हम लोग पहले ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस को हटा के एचएफसीज का टेक्नोलॉजी लाए, एचएफसीज को यूज करने लग गया। अब अचानक से एचएफसीज भी यूज मत करो बोलेगा तो हम कहां से करेंगे, राइट? सो वी नीड टाइम एंड it's better they are covered under UNFCC or Paris Agreement etc. right? But developed countries have sticked कि नहीं नहीं ये मॉन्ट्रियल प्रोटोकॉल में ही कवर करना है. So as happens developed countries always win, right? So Kigali Amendment लाया मॉन्ट्रियल प्रोटोकॉल में in 2016, right? So in 2016, so now HFCs, so HFCs के बारे में पढ़ रहे हैं. HFCs are used as replacement to ozone depleting substances in air conditioning, refrigerants, foam blowing agents, solvents, propellants, aerosols and fire extinguishers. See again ये भी आपको याद करना है. HFCs प्रीलिम्स में दे कैन आस्क क्वेश्चन, ठीक है? हाइड्रोफ्लोरोकार्बन carbons which have high global warming potential can be used in which of the following? So they will give options: air conditioning, refrigerants, foam blowing agents, solvents, propellants, aerosols, fire extinguishers. So you must know everything. So इनको रटना है, राइट? इनमें HFCs यूज होती है, राइट? सो दो HFCs आर नॉट ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस, ठीक है? ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस तो नहीं है HFCs, बट दे आर पार्ट ऑफ शॉर्ट लिव्ड क्लाइमेट पोल्यूटेंट्स. हमने डिस्कस किया शॉर्ट लिव्ड क्लाइमेट पोल्यूटेंट्स with high global warming potential ranging from 12 to 14,000 of carbon dioxide global warming potential, right? So इनको high potential है global warming का, right? So the Kigali Amendment is adopted. So Kigali Agreement was adopted in 2016 to phase down hydrofluorocarbons. अब see डेवलपिंग कंट्री से यही बोलने लगे अब यार मॉन्ट्रियल प्रोटोकॉल तो ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस के लिए, राइट? इनमें हम जो ग्लोबल वार्मिंग पोटेंशियल सब्सटेंसेस है वो क्यों कवर करेंगे? बट डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज ने बोला भाई ये ऑलरेडी सक्सेसफुल है, राइट? तो इनको वो करते हैं बिकॉज सी दे हैव टेक्नोलॉजी. डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज हैव टेक्नोलॉजी, राइट? हाइड्रोफ्लोरोकार्बन्स को रिप्लेस कर सके एसीस वगैरह में, राइट? अब दे वांट टू सेल द टेक्नोलॉजी टू डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज, राइट? सो इसीलिए वो लोग परस्यू किया. अब जो वो चाहते वो हो गया, राइट? इन 2016 टू फेस डाउन हाइड्रोफ्लोरोकार्बन्स, इट एंटर्ड इनटू फोर्स इन 2019, right? So Kigali Agreement entered into force. So it divides nations into three groups with four-step method, four-step path to achieve 80% reduction in hydrofluorocarbons by 2047. So 2047 तक, ठीक है? 2047 तक to achieve 80% reduction in hydrofluorocarbons by 2047. So ये है crux of Kigali Agreement, right? So 80% reduction in hydrofluorocarbons by 2047. So it is legally binding agreement, right? Legally designed to create rights and obligations in international law. As of November 2024, 160 states and the European Union have ratified Kigali Amendment. ठीक है? Kigali Amendment 80% reduction करेंगे by 2047. Then being under group 2, India will complete its phase down of HFCs in 4 steps from 2032 onwards with cumulative reduction of 10% in 2032, 20% in 2037, 30% in 2047 and 85% by 2047. So 2047 तक India will be reducing 85% of its hydrofluorocarbons usage, right? So in phases में, so India is in group 2, right? So group 1 में developed countries होंगे, जल्दी जल्दी खत्म करते होंगे, right? So this is the Kigali Amendment with respect to Montreal Protocol, right? So overall sequence of things we have understood. Now let's see one question. See, this is question asked in UPSC 2015. That is, which of the following is associated with the issue of control and phasing out of ozone depleting substances? So that is Montreal Protocol, right? This is easy question, ठीक है? बिकॉज 2015 में ऐसा क्वेश्चन आते थे, आजकल नहीं आ रही है, राइट? सो नाउ लेट्स सी बेसल कन्वेंशन. बेसल कन्वेंशन ऑन कंट्रोल ऑफ ट्रांसबाउंड्री मूवमेंट ऑफ hazardous waste and their disposal, right? See, it is on hazardous waste, right? See, what was happening is developed countries, right, they have strict norms with respect to waste disposal, right? So it has become expensive. ठीक है, खुद के कंट्रीज में वेस्ट डिस्पोजल करना, वेस्ट सेग्रीगेट करना, राइट? सो व्हाट दे वर डूइंग, डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज आर exporting their waste to African countries, right? So in, and because of African countries and they don't have technology, right, waste segregation वगैरह काफी informal sector में होता है, right? So they are facing many environmental hazards because of the waste disposal in African countries. So to avoid that, Basel Convention has come. See, it is an international treaty that was designed to reduce movement of hazardous waste between nations and especially to prevent a transfer of hazardous waste from developed to less developed countries. Less developed countries are mostly African countries where waste is being disposed, right? So to avoid that, to control, this convention has come, right? So how we can remember it? See, we can remember it as, see, African countries में वेस्ट डिस्पोजल हो रहा है, ठीक है, उसको कंट्रोल करने के लिए, टू अवॉइड वेस्ट डिस्पोजल इन ये, टू अवॉइड ये, वी हैव बॉट बी, राइट, बेसल कन्वेंशन. सो ये बी, बेसल कन्वेंशन, राइट? सो like that is one trick you can remember. Or you can say बेस में जो भी है, राइट, देर इज मेनी वेस्ट मटेरियल इन द बेस, राइट, लाइक दैट यू कैन रिमेंबर, राइट, इन द बेस देर आर मेनी वेस्ट मटेरियल्स, राइट, बेस नीचे नीचे बहुत सारे हजार्डस वेस्ट है, राइट, लाइक दैट यू कैन रिमेंबर, राइट, कंट्रोल ऑन ट्रांसबाउंड्री मूवमेंट ऑफ हजार्डस वेस्ट एंड देयर डिस्पोजल, राइट, right. It also intends to minimize the amount and toxicity of waste and to assist less developed countries in environmentally sound management of hazardous and other waste they generate. So environmentally sound management of hazardous waste, right? It was adopted in 1989 and came into force in 1992. Came into force in 1992, right? Then examples of waste regulated by Basel Convention. What all waste? कुछ भी hazardous waste. So it includes biomedical and healthcare waste, right? In developed countries, this biomedical waste are very toxic waste, right? So they are exported to African countries, right? And then used oils, right? Then used lead acid batteries, then persistent organic pollutants, POPs, persistent organic pollutants waste, then polychlorinated biphenyls, polychlorinated biphenyls, then thousands of chemical waste generated by industries and other consumers. Thousands of chemical waste generated by industries and other consumers, right? So these are the waste covered. And one important point we need to note down is Basel Convention doesn't address the movement of radioactive waste. It doesn't address the movement of radioactive waste. Doesn't address the movement of radioactive waste. So question आ सकता है in under Basel Convention, what all wastes are covered, right? So radioactive waste hoga option mein, so that we need to eliminate, right? So this kind of questions UPSC can ask in prelims. They will give persistent organic pollutant waste, right, biomedical waste, etc. are covered, but radioactive waste is not covered, right? So this is one drawback of Basel Convention, right, we can say, right? So that is Basel Convention, right? Interboundary movement of transboundary movement of hazardous waste and their disposal, right? So now let's see next, that is Rotterdam Convention, right? Rotterdam Convention in 1998, right? Rotterdam Convention or Rotterdam Convention on hazardous chemicals, in international trade. Rotterdam Convention on hazardous chemicals in international trade, right? So it is an international legally binding treaty adopted in 1998 and entered into force in 2004, right? And it to facilitate informed decision. So let's understand Rotterdam Convention में क्या है, right? See, Rotterdam Convention covers hazardous chemicals. So hazardous chemicals are used in industries, right? And hazardous chemicals are used in mostly pesticides, right? So hazardous chemicals are used in pesticides. So Rotterdam Convention on hazardous chemicals in international trade. अब देखो hazardous chemicals pesticides और industries में तो use करेंगे, right? So what does this convention do? This convention focuses on PIC procedure or PIC procedure, or it is called, see, it is called prior informed consent procedure. Prior informed consent. So what does this convention does is, this under this convention, PIC procedure is there. See, PIC is prior informed consent. It has 31 members from different countries, right? So 31 members, जो भी they are scientists, right? And what they do, they list out all the chemicals, all the hazardous chemicals which are used in industries and pesticides, right? So जो भी countries import करना चाहती है, say India is trying to import a pesticide, right? So which is hazardous, right? वो prior informed consent, that is ये PIC प्रोसीजर में दे inform India about, देखो, you are importing this chemical and this chemical has these hazardous chemicals, right? This pesticide has these hazardous chemicals, so make sure that you treat it properly, right? You use it properly, right? So that is priorly informing the importing countries, right? So that is the thing. So that is to facilitate informed decision making by countries with regard to informed decision making. अब इंडिया को इन्फॉर्म मिल गया इसमें ये हानिकारक केमिकल्स है, राइट? सो नाउ इंडिया विल टेक इन्फॉर्म्ड डिसीजन मेकिंग. सो whether you want to import it or not, you take decision, right? And after importing also, how to handle it with care, right? So facilitate informed decision making by countries with regard to trade in hazardous chemicals. It establishes a list of covered chemicals and requires parties seeking to export a chemical on that list to first establish that the intended importing country has consented to the import. So ये exporting country, जैसे we are exporting from USA, so seeking export a chemical, right, requires parties seeking to export a chemical on that list to first establish that the intended importing country has consented to the import. So India अगर consent किया तो भाई तुम export करो, right? So that is informed decision making establish करना. So that is the thing. So it covers pesticides and industrial chemicals that have been banned or severely restricted for health or environmental reason by parties, right? The convention creates legally binding obligations for implementation of prior informed consent procedure. So this is important. So we can be asked, prior informed consent procedure is seen in news, is associated with which convention, right? That is with Rotterdam Convention, right? That is with Rotterdam Convention. So prior informed consent, that is with Rotterdam Convention, right? Rotterdam Convention. And ये कैसे याद करना है? See, dam, Rotterdam में dam is there. So to construct a dam, you need prior permission, right? Prior permission, right? Environmental clearance वगैरह चाहिए. So prior informed consent किसके लिए चाहिए? By dam बनाने के लिए चाहिए, Rotterdam, right? Like that you can easily remember it, right? Prior informed consent procedure, right? It is a mechanism under Rotterdam Convention for formally obtaining and disseminating the decisions for importing parties on their willingness to receive future shipment of hazardous chemicals listed in Appendix 3 of the Convention, and for ensuring compliance with the decisions by exporting parties, right? So prior informed consent. So how we can remember? See, Rotterdam is with respect to hazardous chemicals. So हम ये कर सकते हैं, see, dam में water है, river में dam is constructed, right? So river water में हम, we know in rivers we are releasing industrial chemical pollutants, right? And pesticides का pollutants. So dam में hazardous chemicals है, right? Rivers वगैरह से dam में जब भी water इकट्ठा हुआ, we can see hazardous chemicals and all. So for dam we need prior informed consent. So prior informed consent is associated with Rotterdam Convention, right? So it is jointly administered by FAO and UNEP, right? FAO because pesticides है, Food and Agriculture Organization. So agriculture में pesticides is used. That's why FAO is here, right? So that is about Rotterdam Convention. Now let's see the next convention, that is Aarhus Convention. Aarhus Convention, right? Aarhus Convention, right? Aarhus Convention, right? So this is UNECE. This is United Nations Economic Commission for Europe Convention. So this is specifically for European countries, right? So that is what Aarhus Convention. Aarhus Convention is on access to information, access to public participation, and access to justice in environmental matters. So environmental matters में भाई ताकि लोगों को इंफॉर्मेशन पता हो विथ रेस्पेक्ट टू एनवायरमेंटल इश्यूज एंड विथ रेस्पेक्ट टू पब्लिक पार्टिसिपेशन इन एनवायरमेंटल इश्यूज एंड जस्टिस इन केस ऑफ एनवायरमेंटल इश्यूज बीइंग वायलेटेड, जैसे फॉरेस्ट राइट्स प्रोवाइड नहीं किया, राइट, सो जस्टिस मिलना चाहिए। मान ले पोल्यूशन से इफेक्ट हुआ, लोगों को जस्टिस मिलना चाहिए, कंपेंसेशन मिलना चाहिए। सो दैट इज Aarhus Convention, right? It is important. See, nowhere it is covered, right? In standard books like Shankar, PMF, etc. These things are not covered, but they are important. They can be asked in prelims, right? So, United Nations Economic Commission for Europe Convention on access to information, public participation, and access to justice in environmental matters was signed in 1998 in the Danish city of Aarhus and entered into force in 2001. It is ratified by 41 countries which include EU members and Central Asian countries, right? So it is the leading international agreement on environmental democracy because it is talking about public participation and information dissemination, right? So it is on environmental democracy. It protects every person's right to live in a healthy environment, right? So the Aarhus Convention guarantees the public three key rights on environmental issues. That is access to information, that is public's right to receive environmental information held by public authorities. Public participation, that is public's right to participate in environmental decision making, and access to justice, that is public right of justice if their rights are violated, right? So these are the things with respect to Aarhus Convention. Very easy, right? So in prelims they can directly ask what is Aarhus Convention is associated with what, right? Match the following type of thing they can give. Right, now let's see next, that is Stockholm Convention. See, Stockholm Convention on persistent organic pollutants. Stockholm Convention on persistent organic pollutants. So that is POPs. Persistent organic pollutants. That is POPs. Persistent organic pollutants. POPs. S. That is Stockholm Convention. Right. So persistent organic pollutant. That is Stockholm Convention, right? Stockholm Convention, right? POPs. So S, POPs, persistent organic pollutants. That is POPs. POPs में S is Stockholm. So like that we can remember. So Stockholm is related to POPs, persistent organic pollutants. Stockholm Convention, right? Stockholm Convention is an international legally binding agreement to protect human health and environment from persistent organic pollutants. See, these persistent organic pollutants are very dangerous pollutants, right? So उनसे human health को और environment को protect करने के लिए ये Stockholm Convention हुआ, right? It is adopted in 2001 and entered into force in 2004. It has 186 parties, 185 states and the European Union, and India ratified it in 2006. And notable non-ratifying states, that is US, Israel and Malaysia, उन्होंने ratify नहीं किया ये, right? And now let's understand what are persistent organic pollutants, right? So this is, see, and let's look at this line. Ministry of Environment notified regulation of persistent organic pollutants in 2018 under the Environment Protection Act, right? ये भी याद करना है, Environment Protection Act के अंदर ये persistent organic pollutants को regulate करती है. Then what are persistent organic pollutants? See, persistent organic pollutants, see, persistent, that means they persist, that means persist for more time in the environment, right? So organic and pollutants are, these are what? Chemical substances. Persistent organic pollutants are chemical substances that persist in environment for a long period, bioaccumulate in living organisms, persist in environment for a long period, bioaccumulate in living organisms, right? Adversely affect human health, environment, and have the property of long range एनवायरमेंट ट्रांसपोर्ट, राइट, ये एक जगह पोल्यूट नहीं करेंगे, इंडिया में ये यूज कर रहा है तो दिस दे कैन गो टू यूएसए एंड दे कैन पोल्यूट, राइट, दे कैन गो टू पाकिस्तान एंड दे कैन पोल्यूट, दे कैन गो टू यूरोप एंड दे कैन पोल्यूट, लॉन्ग रेंज एनवायरमेंटल ट्रांसपोर्ट, राइट, दे कैन, बिकॉज बायो एक्यूमुलेट होता है, जैसे मान ले ईगल है, राइट, माइग्रेटरी बर्ड्स, दे कैन कंज्यूम देम इन इंडिया एंड दे कैन गो एंड रिलीज देम इन अदर, जैसे फिश है, राइट, बायो एक्यूमुलेट दे कैन डू, राइट, they can migrate to other oceans also and pollute there, right, then exposure to persistent organic pollutants can lead to cancer, damage to central and peripheral nervous system, diseases of immune system, reproductive disorders and child development. So cancer, damage to central and peripheral nervous system, disease of immune system, reproductive disorders and child development, right, then the chemicals targeted are listed in annexes of convention text. See, ये इतना इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है, बेसिकली जो भी केमिकल्स है, जो भी परसिस्टेंट ऑर्गेनिक पोल्यूटेंट्स है, राइट, उनको लेवल ऑफ उनका नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट है, दे आर पुट इन 3 एनेक्सेस, जो भी एनेक्स 1 ए में रखा है उनको एलिमिनेट करने के लिए ट्राई करना चाहिए, जो भी एनेक्स बी में रखा है उन पे रिस्ट्रिक्ट, एंड जो भी एनेक्स सी में रखा है उनको अनइंटेंशनल प्रोडक्शन रोकना चाहिए, रिड्यूस अनइंटेंशनल प्रोडक्शन, राइट, ये इतना इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है, हमें इतना अंदर घुसने की जरूरत नहीं है, राइट, देन नेक्स्ट इज इनिशियली अंडर दिस कन्वेंशन देयर आर 12 persistent organic pollutants, right, इनिशियली 12 persistent organic pollutants को रखा है, known as dirty dozen, known as dirty dozen, right, 12 रखे थे उनको dirty dozen करके बोलते थे. Currently there are 30 chemicals listed under the list, राइट, 30 केमिकल्स, सो दे आर 8 पेस्टिसाइड्स है, 2 इंडस्ट्रियल केमिकल्स है, 2 इंडस्ट्रियल बाई प्रोडक्ट्स है, राइट, इसमें और 30 में भी अलग अलग चीज है, सो नो नीड टू रिमेंबर दीस थिंग्स. सी वी कैन रिमेंबर फ्यू थिंग्स लाइक सी डीडीटी एंड एंड्रिन, राइट, दीज आर एक्सटेंसिवली यूज्ड इन इंडिया एंड दे आर persistent organic pollutants, right, then furans and dioxins, right, so these things no need to remember all these things, just know about persistent organic pollutants. First thing we need to remember is which convention, right, deals with persistent organic pollutants, that is Stockholm, POPs, POPs, and S represents Stockholm, so POPs persistent organic pollutants ko Stockholm convention, right, then let's do next. This is Minamata convention on mercury. See, Minamata convention on mercury, right, so while discussing pollutants we haven't discussed mercury there because we'll be covering mercury, unka sources, kya affect karti hai, all these things in here. So Minamata convention on mercury, that is in 2013, right, so Minamata convention on mercury is first global legally binding treaty, to protect human health and environment from the adverse effects of mercury, right, it was adopted in 2013 and entered into force in 2017, right, right, and it has 144 parties and 128 signatories to it, 144 parties and 128 signatories to it, right, named after the city in Japan that became the epicenter of Minamata disease, right, so basically what Minamata is a city in Japan, right, either कुछ इंडस्ट्रीज दे हैव रिलीज्ड mercury, वो mercury यूज कर रहे थे, सो दे रिलीज mercury polluted water into the water of the city, राइट, सो वो कंज्यूम करके लोगों को हुआ Minamata disease. Minamata disease is what? It is a neurological disease, right, a neurological disease. तो उन से भाई पता चला mercury pollution कितना डेंजरस है, राइट, सो keeping in mind अभी भी mercury pollution हो रहा था, so keeping that in mind, so Minamata convention is there, right, so Minamata convention named after city in Japan that became epicenter of Minamata disease, a neurological disease caused by severe mercury poisoning in 1950s, right, so India ratified the convention in 2018 with flexibility for continued use of mercury based products and processes involving mercury compounds up to 2025, right, up to 2025, right, so India ratified it in 2018 with the flexibility for continued use of mercury based products and processes involving mercury compounds up to 2025, right? 2025 तक थोड़ा liberation मिला हुआ. Now let's see. मिनेमाटा कन्वेंशन रिक्वायर्स पार्टी नेशंस. अगर इंडिया साइन किया तो वो क्या चाहती है इंडिया से, राइट? रिक्वायर्स reduce and where feasible eliminate the use and release of mercury from artisanal and small scale gold mining. See, gold mining releases mercury, right? So अगर मिनेमाटा कन्वेंशन साइन किया तो यू नीड टू reduce and जहां feasible है तो eliminate, right? Eliminate use and release of mercury from artisanal and small scale gold mining. Then control mercury air emissions, right? Mercury air emissions from coal fired power plants, coal fired industrial boilers. So that means whenever a coal is burned, there is emission of mercury, right? This point we need to remember, right? Coal fired power plants, right? Coal fired industrial boilers, certain non-ferrous metals production operations, waste incineration. तो वेस्ट को गर्म करते हैं, राइट? उधर भी mercury निकलेगा, right? And cement production. So these all are sources of mercury pollution, right? In prelims question can be asked, mercury is released from which of the following sources, right? From artisanal and small scale gold mining से, coal fired power plants, जब भी coal burn करते हैं तो mercury निकलता है, small amounts of mercury. That you need to keep in mind, right? Then certain non-ferrous metal production operations, waste incineration, ये भी important. Waste जब गर्म करते हैं तो mercury small quantities में निकलता है, and cement production में भी. Then phase out or reduce mercury use in products like, अब mercury किस किस products में use हो रहा है? Batteries, switches, lights, cosmetics, pesticides and measuring devices जैसे thermometer है, right? Temperature measure devices, उसमें mercury use कर रहा है, right? And create incentives to reduce the use of mercury in dental amalgams. So dental fillings, right? जो root canal वगैरह है, so dental fillings में mercury is used, right? उसमें भी create initiatives to reduce use of mercury in dental amalgam, right? So phase out or reduce mercury use in products like batteries, switches, lights, cosmetics, pesticides, and measuring devices, and create initiatives to reduce the use of mercury in dental amalgam, right? Then phase out or reduce the use of mercury in manufacturing processes such as chlor-alkali production, vinyl chloride monomer production, and acetaldehyde production, right? So mercury use of manufacturing processes such as chlor-alkali production, vinyl chloride monomer production and acetaldehyde production, right? इन चीजों में से mercury, right, use of in manufacturing process में use होते हैं, right? Then address supply and trade of mercury, safer storage and disposal, and strategies to address contaminated sites, right? Then convention also puts ban on new mercury mines, right? Ban on new mercury mines. Then in 2023, fifth meeting of conference of parties was held, right? So their key decisions adopted of 5, that is limit of 15 milligram per kg concentration of mercury is set as threshold for waste contaminated with mercury or mercury compound. So एक लिमिट सेट किया भाई, इससे ज्यादा होना नहीं चाहिए mercury limit of 15 milligram per kg concentration of mercury. Then amend Annex B of the convention to mandate phase out of mercury in polyurethane production by 20. So that means polyurethane में mercury is produced by 2025. Then implementation of projects and programs undertaken under convention with the participation of indigenous people and local communities, right? So implementation of projects and programs undertaken under convention with the participation of indigenous people and local communities, उनको participate करना है, right? So that is with respect to mercury. Again very important topic. mercury कहाँ से release होती है, किस किस industries में use होती है, किस किस manufacturing process में use होती है, everything is mentioned here, right? You need to remember all the things because कहीं से भी कुछ भी घुमा के यूपीएससी क्वेश्चन पूछ सकती है, right? So that is with respect to Minamata Convention, right? Now is the Earth Summit. See, नेक्स्ट क्लास में हम लोग डिस्कस करेंगे अर्थ समिट, एंड अर्थ समिट में बना हुआ यूएनएफसीसी, राइट, यूएन सीबीडी, यूएन सीसीडी, राइट, all these things we'll be discussing, right? So next class again is going to be very important class, right? So see you in the next class. Bye.